So the first trauma is they see something frightening and strange that shatters their worldview. The second trauma is when they try and talk to their family and friends about it. Instead of going, "Oh, John, that's terrible. Tell me more. You look really upset. Let's go for a beer. Let's talk about it." "No, you are a liar. That you didn't see this. This is horrible. You've gone crazy. Leave me alone." And then the third trauma, the tertiary trauma, is when they reach out and try and have medical support. The pathologization is, instead of the doctor responding or the therapist responding to the fact they've seen something strange and frightening, they're regarded as potentially mentally ill. That's a psychosis, possibly an indication of schizophrenia. So being given a mental illness diagnosis and put on antipsychotics when you've just seen something strange that you can't explain, that's not a good place to be. And that leads to people not going and talking to anybody about it because the consequences of doing so. So where am I going with this? It's not just a question of having conversations. It's a question about having the right conversations. And one of the things Unhidden has done in the last month is we've started a conversations group led by a registered psychologist, this is in Australia, to give a structure to the sort of conversations that are helpful, uplifting, positive, that focus on the curious dimensions of the revelations. What a time to be alive. Aren't we incredibly lucky to be living at the point where potentially we're going to find out much more about the nature of the universe than our forebears could ever dream of? That's a very positive, uplifting thing. So the nature and structure of those conversations is important. And one final analogy to give to that, which is the largest group I could find of structured support delivered outside formal government circles is Alcoholics Anonymous, who care for around 1 million people at any one time in their various programs across their various countries, 1 million people. That is not a random conversation where you go along and have a chat with a friend about your addiction and your alcoholism. That is a structured conversation led by a leader with rules, and you buy into that or you don't, and it's self-sustaining. I'm not saying we need that sort of thing for ontological shock, but providing structured conversations with the ability to escalation protocols if people need additional support. So we have put lots of effort into those protocols, including mental health triage, so that if somebody is actually exhibiting mental health type issues, that there is somewhere to go and the conversation is not left sort of hanging. So it's all about conversations. That's the theme of this. This conversation is about conversations, Julia.
It always is. So that's fantastic. I'm excited about this thing you're starting in Australia, and I'm wondering if we can hook it in with, I've got this sort of 12-step like support group going for people who were in these early childhood programs like SOAR and GATE. And maybe they could become part of, I should introduce you to the woman who's leading those. She's a mental health worker who's leading those, because it's all the same. But I think there's a quaternary trauma potentially, which is particularly for the people who have already had an ontological shock like this. Let's say they had an abduction experience, or they saw something very clearly that changed their life, changed their understanding of the way the universe works, and then have gone through those 3 traumas. And then sometimes the way that people can manage their identity and their well-being after going through those 3 traumas is to decide it's part of their identity to know something that other people don't know. And so when when disclosure happens, then for them, there's a 4th trauma of, well, now everyone knows the thing that made me special, and I'm not special anymore. And I think that can be kind of my sense is, based on no data, but just a feeling, that can be kind of an unconscious fear that people who know any kind of information that other people don't know, which includes a lot of the intelligence community, and includes folks who have had these experiences and gone through those traumas, and there's an interesting overlap between those groups, that makes them work against the disclosure and makes them work against saying, see, ontological shock is bad, we should avoid it, don't tell anyone anything. But underlying that is this recognition that a subconscious or unconscious, usually recognition that says, I'm special because I know this information. What do you think of that?
I think that's really interesting and is not a dimension of why particular care needs to be given to experiences that we'd contemplated. So we have thought about the special support that experiences need, but not the particular mindset that you've described. So I'm fascinated by that. Just a little bridging piece around the core of our preparedness plan. So I talked about some of the public health principles on which it's based a little while back. At its heart is a health needs assessment, a structured analysis of what care and support might be needed and at what scale. And we took 7 groups and we identified 4 that were potentially at higher risk of ontological shock. And those were people with a strong science and technology, a STEM background, because of the rigidity of their worldview and the fact that very clever, intelligent people are very, very good at arguing back to preserve that worldview. And that can be stressful. People with strong religious beliefs, which is already touched on. One of the most important public health principles is whenever there's a disaster or an emergency, the people who come off worst are the most vulnerable, the people who are least able to reach out for care and support or have the least resources. So the third group at high risk is vulnerable people, so people in socio-economically disadvantaged backgrounds and people who've had prior mental health difficulties. And then the fourth group is experiences.